All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending session 5B, Making Connections at the RDAP Summit in 2024, or RDAP Summit 2024, sorry. Before we get started, I do want to just go over a few things. This is a Zoom webinar. Attendees are muted and your cameras are turned off. And to ask a question, please make sure to use the Q&A in Zoom at the bottom of the screen. So the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. This session will run from 3:15 to 4:15 Eastern Time or 12:15 to 1:15 Pacific, and we'll try and keep the last 15 minutes for a Q&A. This session will include 2 live presentations followed by 2 pre-recorded lightning talks, and you will be able to ask questions of presenters from both the live and the recorded talks at the end. And please make sure to indicate the presenter or presenters you would like to direct your question to. And like I said, we will save the questions till the end of the session. And if we can't get to your question, or if you have more questions, please feel free to drop them in the session chat in Feedloop and continue the conversation there. All right, the Research Data Access and Preservation RDAP Summit organizers are committed to providing an environment where all attendees can participate fully in the program and activities without fear of harassment or discriminatory behavior of any kind. There is a code of conduct helper available during this session, Emily Kilser, and she is identified as the code of conduct helper in Feedloop and Zoom. You may direct messages to her in Feedloop if you need assistance, and she can give you the code of conduct email address or the link to the incident report form if needed. All right, so with that, let's move on to our presentations. First, we will hear from Anna Sackman, Elliott Smith, Lisa No, and Misha Coleman from UC Berkeley. Their presentation is titled Bridging Data Communities, Interoperability Through Inclusive Cross-Institutional Collaboration.
Can everyone see my screen okay? Okay, great. Thank you.
Muted. Hi, and thanks for joining us. There are 4 of us on this project that are here today, so we're just going to go ahead and introduce ourselves really quickly. My name's Lisa Ngo, and I'm the engineering librarian at UC Berkeley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Sackman, and I'm the data services librarian.
Hey, everyone. I'm Misha Coleman, STEM librarian.
And I'm Elliott Smith, the Emerging Technologies and Bioinformatics librarian.
So our presentation outlines the development and growth of an Introduction to Data Analysis workshop series at the University of California, Berkeley. UC Berkeley is a really large, decentralized research institution, which makes it really challenging for librarians to identify and address gaps in information fluency, digital literacy, and research skills. But even in this environment, we observe that regardless of major or discipline, most of the UC Berkeley undergraduate students will encounter basic data science concepts and be expected to perform some form of data analysis. Specifically, we recognized an increase in the number of students who were required to have some basic ability to work with Python, and that students not enrolled in data science courses were expected to develop data analysis and visualization skills on their own. So to further investigate student needs and data analysis tools and knowledge, and to identify gaps in support on campus, in 2019, we surveyed undergraduates in the College of Engineering. Our survey found that the gap in data support particularly impacted lower division and transfer students, so those who are most unfamiliar with campus resources and aren't sure where to turn for help, and that some of these needs could possibly be met by an introductory workshop series focused on the basics of working with Python. So instead of taking this all on within the library, because it was just me and Anna at the time, we tried to develop a sustainable and scalable solution by partnering with the data science discovery consultants within the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society, which is a really long name. And I think from here on out, we're just going to refer to them as CDSS. The discovery consultants are a group of undergraduates majoring in data science and related fields who receive training to offer consultation services across a wide range of topics, including Python, R, SQL, and Tableau, and they're employed by CDSS. So our partnership employs a train the trainer model where librarians train the discovery consultants and give them the opportunity to learn how to design and teach hands-on technical workshops. The workshops themselves use a peer-to-peer learning model with the discovery consultants as instructors. This kind of lowers the barrier to learning for our undergraduate attendees and enhances motivation and understanding. We borrowed from the carpentries for both the content and the philosophy around teaching technical topics. And the discovery consultants also help to develop the series content by providing feedback on evolving student needs based on their on-the-ground consulting work. And Misha's going to talk more about that relationship and the roles of the librarians and the consultants a little bit later. So we launched this workshop series in 2020 targeting engineering students, and it has since expanded to appeal to all disciplines on campus. And in 2022, we began a more targeted campaign to reach underrepresented groups on campus and in the California community colleges. And I'm going to pass it over to Anna to talk more about how our outreach has grown over the years. Oh, and this is a picture of all of our wonderful data consultants that are on this slide that have worked with us over the years.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're now in our 4th year of the workshop series and the partnership. And each year we iterate on the content and the delivery to reflect the changes that have occurred in the library and in CDSS. The workshop series has never been closed to include only specific student groups, but we have scaled our outreach efforts in hopes of addressing our workload and familiarity with student groups. So as Lisa mentioned, we began the project in spring 2020 by surveying students about their needs in the College of Engineering. So because we already had connections to the student newsletter and other College of Engineering communication channels, this was a really logical place to target our outreach. The next year, by fall 2021, another librarian, Elliot, here with us today, joined our team to support the series and the partnership. Elliot has a really long-standing relationship with the departments in the life and health sciences on campus that he supports. So we decided to extend our outreach to undergraduates in those departments. And then with the addition of a third librarian in 2022 who provided some general information literacy instruction, we were able to take a broader approach with outreach and attempted to reach just as many undergraduates as possible. This resulted in attendance from students coming from a wider variety of disciplines. During this time, we also learned that the College of Data Science was working to expand their own outreach to California community colleges. So based on this goal, we decided to include community colleges in our outreach and offer an introduction workshop in Spanish. By spring 2023, CDSS received a California Learning Lab grant, and this really enabled them to officially expand the data science curriculum and pathways to California community colleges and to the University of California, Merced. So because of this, we'll likely continue to open the workshop series up to as many California community colleges as we can, and perhaps make more changes to grow the program. So here's a bar chart that visualizes our registration and attendance numbers from year to year. Targeting outreach for departments and student groups, anecdotally, I think leads to better registration and attendance numbers, whereas taking a more blanket approach relies on people with whom we really have no connections to read the email or to notice the calendar invite and spread the word to others who may be interested. A lot of the success of this program with outreach has come from leveraging personal connections where trust has already been built and established, and that's resulted in some of our best outreach outcomes. So because we began the workshop series in fall 2020, the majority of our workshops have taken place over Zoom. Following the workshops, we would always caption the recordings and make them available to anyone who registered for the workshops. But this last year, partially due to YouTube's pretty solid captioning capabilities, we decided to make the recordings available through a playlist that is now open for anyone to view. And you can see based on our view numbers on this slide, this has led to more views than we originally had and greater reach of content availability. And now I'm going to turn it over to Misha.
So this series is a partnership between the library and the data science discovery consultants in CDSS. As Lisa shared, the discovery consultants are undergraduate students employed in CDSS to offer consulting services. So what does our train the trainer approach look like in practice? The discovery consultants are responsible for developing and delivering the workshops, and we librarians are responsible for coaching them through that process. The librarians take responsibility for setting a timetable and providing training sessions on instructional design and teaching technical skills. We also act as organizers, promoters, and hosts for the workshops. As a group, we strategize about the content we want to offer for the semester's sessions. And as the student instructors develop their content, we build in time for them to practice delivering it, both in person and recorded, and to receive feedback. The model has benefits for everyone involved. As Lisa mentioned, this approach leads to a peer-to-peer learning environment that increases motivation and understanding for participants. The discovery consultants gain experience constructing workshops and teaching technical skills, and the librarians can reach more students than the library could as sole service provider. So to develop workshop content, the discovery consultants and librarians work to adapt lessons from open source curricula from the Carpentries, which is an international nonprofit that develops and hosts workshops teaching data and computational skills. The Carpentries' evidence-based active learning approach, which includes participatory live coding and hands-on exercises, provides the librarians with a solid pedagogical foundation to build from as we work with the discovery consultants. Taking cues from the Carpentries' commitment to openness, we present our adapted lessons in Jupyter notebooks and make them readily accessible via GitHub. The core Carpentries' values of empowering one another, valuing all contributions, and fostering inclusive, welcoming learning environments resonates with the discovery consultants, and they enthusiastically put those values into practice in the workshops. Throughout our lessons, we emphasize that we are all learners, including the instructors, and it's okay not to know. The workshop offerings have changed slightly each semester since 2020 based on instructor capacity, participant feedback from previous workshops, as well as the discovery consultants' firsthand knowledge of fellow students' needs from their consulting work. One recent addition to the workshop offerings that exemplifies our student instructors' commitment to fostering inclusive learning environments has been the development of a Spanish language introductory Python workshop. One of the consultants, Diego, is a native Spanish speaker and was motivated to develop an environment where native speakers could better connect with the content and each other. He made significant adaptations to the existing English language lesson, providing thoughtful explanations of programming terminology tailored for a Spanish-speaking audience. I speak Spanish and am committed to using it in my role as a librarian where possible, so I was really delighted to support Diego in crafting content, rehearsing, and delivering the workshop last fall. And so where are we headed next? Building on the increasing outreach to California community colleges that Anna noted, faculty at an area community college have expressed interest in bringing the workshop series to their campus, both in English and Spanish, and conversations to plan sessions there are underway. We will also continue to grow and adapt the workshops, taking into account how quickly the field of data science is moving and changing. The discovery consultants offer our series a boots on the ground, real-time perspective on what students on campus need based on interactions through their work. And now I'm going to turn it over to Elliot to talk about effective strategies and lessons we've learned.
Thank you, Misha. A good first step is to explore and identify the needs of your target audience. Anna and Lisa conducted a survey of engineering undergraduates, but information gleaned from focus groups or individual consultations might also be helpful. Identifying the areas of greatest need will help you determine the scope and content of your program. Identify relevant programs and staff as potential partners and leverage their expertise. As Lisa mentioned, for us, it was the undergraduate data science discovery consultants and their leadership. In seeking partners, be sure that your goals and desired outcomes align. Recruit diverse peer instructors and helpers, which for many students will lower barriers to participation and provide a model of belonging. Varying the roles of presenters and helpers will divide the labor equitably, keep things fresh and engaging for everyone, and improve the skills of all. Communication is key. Find out how your instructors and helpers prefer to be contacted. We set up a Slack channel and held regular check-ins. The Carpentries provide effective ready-made models for both online and in-person coding instruction with open source tested content. As Misha mentioned, the Carpentries emphasize inclusivity, collaboration, diversity, and that it's okay not to know, providing many students with a point of entry to data science. The curriculum is flexible, crossing disciplinary and domain boundaries. Building presenter skills is an explicit goal of our workshops. In addition to organizing and hosting the workshops, developing the consultants' pedagogical and presentation skills is a key librarian contribution to the success of the series. We found it important to include plenty of preparation and rehearsal time and to create intermediate deadlines as check-in points. It's also important, of course, to meet students where they are. Schedule the workshops at times when students have fewer conflicts. We found the early evening tended to be best. Delivering the workshops in multiple modes, in-person and Zoom, and languages, English and Spanish, has enabled us to make it possible for the greatest number of students to participate and to reach underserved communities. As Anna noted, we leveraged our partner networks for effective outreach. Partner programs can have their own mailing lists, social media channels, and connections within and beyond the home institution. And we provided recordings for all students who registered so that those who attended could review the material and those who were unable to attend could still benefit. And of course, now we are posting videos to YouTube. We'd like to thank our partners in the library and the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society for their contributions to the success of the workshops. And we'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and we'll be happy to answer any questions after all the presentations.
All right, thank you all for that really interesting presentation. Okay, so next up, we will hear from Danica Evering from McMaster University, Megan Goodchild from Queen's University, and Shahira Kher from the University of Victoria. Their presentation is titled Bridging Boundaries, a Community-Led Survey of Institutional Collection Administrators.
Thank you so much for the introduction. We'll just take a moment to introduce ourselves quickly. I'm Megan Goodchild. I'm the Research Data Management Librarian at Queen's University and Scholars Portal of the Ontario Council of University Libraries. So hello from up north in Canada. Danica, did you want to do a quick intro?
Sorry about that. I'm Danica Evering. I'm a Research Data Management Specialist at McMaster University.
And
I'm Shahira.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Shahira Kher. I'm a data curation librarian at the University of Victoria. Nice to see you all.
So thank you so much for having us. We're really pleased to be here to discuss a community-led initiative to design and implement a survey of Canadian institutional Dataverse collection administrators. So we'll begin with a really brief background about Dataverse in Canada and the impetus for this project, and then we'll focus on some interesting results from the survey. And we'll also share a link to our slides in the chat in just a moment too. So first, we'll start with a bit of background context. I'm sure many of you have heard about Dataverse. It's an open source repository software that allows users to deposit, publish, share, and discover research data. And there are installations all over the world. In Canada, we now have a shared national Dataverse repository called Borealis, the Canadian Dataverse repository. And this is supported by institutions, regional academic library consortia, the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and it's hosted the University of Toronto Libraries. To give you a brief description of the development, in the 2010s, there were a few institutional or regional Dataverse installations, including Scholars Portal Dataverse that was launched in 2010, and that was for Ontario. But in 2018, there was a recommendation from our national RDM community to launch a national Dataverse service. And this was really to realize economies of scale and to provide more equitable access to the research infrastructure. So as a result, Scholars Portal Dataverse expanded nationally in 2020 and was renamed to Borealis in 2022. And now we have over 70 post-secondary institutions that participate in the service, and it's still growing. I think we're onboarding number 71 as we speak. So in Borealis, each institution manages and customizes their own institutional collection space and develops their own local policies and workflows. And as a result, there's a really growing community of institutional collection administrators. And these are librarians or other staff at the institution who manage their collection and provide support to the local researchers and their community in order to help them deposit and share their data. So to support this community, there's a new Borealis admin community facilitation team. And this is made up of members of the Borealis team as well as community members and the Alliance. And this group really oversees monthly community meetings, a listserv for knowledge exchange and things like that. So given the growth of this community, there was a strong need to better understand who these collection administrators are and what challenges they face. So a working group was formed with members of this community and the Borealis team to develop the survey. And the goals of the survey was really to develop a better understanding of this community in terms of the demographics, institutional contexts, the service models, collection policies, experiences using the Dataverse software, and the perceptions of this growing national community of administrators. We also wanted to collect this information really to help the Borealis community facilitation team design initiatives to support this group and also give some feedback to the Borealis team to maybe enhance the software itself. In terms of the survey design, there are 5 sections to cover a variety of topics. We asked about administering the collection, which departments or units are responsible, what's the support capacity and the challenges they experience. We looked more broadly at the context of how the institutional Dataverse collection fits into the RDM services at the institution. Third, we asked about collection policies and procedures, including the type of curation service they're able to offer. In section 4, we asked about the usefulness of the current software features and if there are any enhancements that could be developed to support their needs. And finally, we asked them about their perceptions and experiences of the national community. They are attending the community meetings and any additional support they might need. And now I'll turn it over to Danica to talk about our open science approach to this survey.
Thanks, Megan. So this is just a little interlude to kind of frame the research that we did in the context of open science. As data librarians and as RDM professionals, we felt really strongly that we must walk the talk. If we're supporting research, then we need to follow the same research practices that we ask of the researchers that we're working with. So not only does this involve ensuring that our network makes data-informed decisions, it also means seeing the research that we do as research and treating it as such. So what that looked like in our project was for the survey doing qualitative pre-testing, including cognitive interviews and translation of the materials into French. We went through an ethics process. So Megan and Elisa, as our PIs, went through the Queen's Research Ethics Board and vetted our informed consent form, communications, and survey instrument. We developed a data management plan, which is something that we often ask researchers to take time to do, but it was actually really good for us to go through that process as well, both to understand it from a user standpoint, but also to align our data practices better. And we'll share this in our OSF or link to it once that's ready. And then we also, because we went through ethics, we were able to openly share our data and code. And so I've shared those links in the chat, so everyone should have access to that. And I'll ask Megan to just go to the next little mini slide. So I think there are probably similar systems in the States, but in Canada, our Tri-Council, our national funding agency, has an ethical conduct for research involving humans that says that quality assurance and quality improvement studies and assessment do not fall within the scope of ethics board review and do not count as research. But what this means is that you can't publish it or share the data. So I would encourage everyone not to, next slide, Megan, not to smash this button, but consider your work as research and use that to walk the talk, but then also be able to kind of share it more broadly. So I'll pass it over to Shira.
Thanks, Danica. Okay, on to some of the results. This was a really long survey, as you probably would have guessed from Megan going through the 5 different sections. And so we're just going to cover a few of the kind of main results we'd like to share with you today, but we published all of our output just as our Markdown notebook It's posted online, so you can follow the link I put in the chat if you want to see all of the summary figures. And then the headings that we're going to go through correspond to that too. So if you want to click next. And then, yeah, so on the link too, if you're following along, all the code's up there too, but you can hide that if you click next, Megan. Yeah, just with that little drop down arrow if you don't want to see the code as well. Yeah, okay. So first finding, next slide. Who responded to our survey? So like Megan mentioned, we are quite a large network of growing Dataverse collections, each administered by their own institution in their own institutional context. We had pretty good participation. We ran the survey about a year ago. We had 46 respondents, and at the time that was 68% of Borealis members. And it was nice to have broad representation from across the country too. Next slide. In addition to that sort of geographic representation, we also had pretty good representation of like institutional size. And so we categorized respondents according to this banding system from CRKN, which is kind of like our national resource like licensing body. And so they have this formula that we just used to make our lives easier. And it takes into consideration the amount of sponsored research that an institution holds, and as well as number of like full-time students and faculty. So we broke out respondents according to approximate like size. So you can think of large, medium, and small institutions generally as representing kind of like scale and then like research intensity as well. And one more thing to keep in mind too, we don't really get into it in these slides, but just in terms of the like kind of maturity of services within these institutions, most large institutions have been members longer than smaller institutions, which have joined more recently. So that's something to keep in mind when interpreting the results too. Okay, next slide. Turn it back to Megan.
Great, thank you. So the first set of questions really investigated the amount of support allocated to the management of their institution's Dataverse collection. So if we look just generally, over half of the respondents dedicated less than a quarter of an FTE to their institution's Dataverse collection. However, we also saw that the larger the institution, the larger the proportion that is able to devote more time to the management of their collection. So this figure shows that small institutions on the right almost exclusively selected less than 0.25 FTE. One respondent selected other and indicated an interesting thing. So this is a quote. We don't allocate work using FTE. We just do whatever we have time for and hope for the best. So that's kind of the experience of maybe some of these newer, smaller institutions. And in the middle, the majority of medium institutions selected less than 0.25 FTE, but a couple indicated they provided more support for their collection, with a few respondents for 0.25 to 0.5 and 0.6 to 1.0. And one respondent said, don't know. Large institutions selected a range of options. Just over a quarter selected less than 0.25, and over a quarter selected 0.25 to 0.5, and just under a quarter selected 0.6 to 1.0, and about 14% selected 1.1 to 1.5. And as Shahira mentioned, this also aligns kind of what we understand about the maturity of these services, and the larger institutions have been offering these services longer, so they tend to have more service maturity and perhaps more support in those areas. The next survey questions asked respondents how the collection would change over the next 2 years in terms of the FTE support. In this figure, you can see over half of the large and medium institutions expect the amount of FTE supporting their institution's Dataverse collection to increase over the next 2 years. These are the green bars. And about 1/3 of large and medium expect the FTE to remain about the same in that time, and that's shown in the purple. But in contrast, small institutions selected, only about 1/3 selected that they expect the FTE supporting their institution's collection to increase over the next 2 years, and almost half expect the FTE to remain the same. Only a few selected don't know for all sizes, so there are some uncertainty there for all sizes of institutions. And then this next figure is looking at the expected rate of new deposits over the next 2 years. And the vast majority, if you look just generally across all responses, about 89% expect the rate of new deposits to increase over the next 2 years. If you look at the breakdown for sizes, 81% of large institutions expect an increase, and only 4.8 expect the same, and a few selected don't know. For medium, 93% expected an increase, and only about 6% expect the same rate. And for small institutions, 100% expected the rate of deposits to increase. This kind of reflects a general anticipation of sort of a culture change in terms of data sharing. We have the forthcoming data deposit requirement for our tri-agency RDM policy in Canada. It's coming up over the next few years. So we're really expecting to see the rate of deposits to increase across all institution sizes, of course. And now I'll just turn it over to Danica to talk about some of the challenges faced by the administrators and some desired software enhancements.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, we can just look at it quickly at some of the key challenges for our community. We can see some of the main things are researcher awareness. Lack of incentives is something that was identified at least by the Dataverse administrators, and then developing institutional guidelines or policy. And some of these are things that we can adapt as a kind of national network. Some of the other ones in the middle are staffing resources, which we've all kind of identified, technical functionality of the Dataverse software, and administrator knowledge of the Dataverse platform, which could be remedied by training sessions and stuff like that. So if you go to the next slide, I think it just gives you an idea of some of the key enhancements. And in this slide, the smaller numbers are indicating a higher priority. So Megan, if you just click again, then we'll get the three main ones. So some of the main software enhancements that people would like to see are sensitive data. I think that's something that we're all dealing with. Data buy-in with Indigenous communities and more kind of functionality to support that. And then big data, how to kind of support big data upload and download. Next slide, Megan. The curation models, I'll just get into really quickly. We have a range of curation models across Canada. So in the case of mediated, this means that administrators will create and publish data sets on behalf of researchers. Semi-mediated is when researchers create their own data sets and submit them for review or curation by administrators. Semi-unmediated is that administrators train researchers before and then are kind of given permission to publish data sets on their own. And then unmediated, which is research create and publish their own kind of sub-collection. So we were happy to see that unmediated is relatively small, but this is a kind of question as a national network of what that looks like moving forward. And semi-mediated is the highest one, that researchers would create data sets and then kind of submit them for review. Next slide, Megan. So in terms of services that are provided by admins, this is pretty interesting. So user consultations, platform training, data set review, and data curation are fairly high. But we can see things like software or code curation, curation training, and preservation processing are relatively nascent in our group. And just to note that we're planning on running this a couple of times again. So I wonder if we'll maybe see this change over time. And we're not going to get into 29A for time, but if you're interested, we mapped the Dataverse curation guide, which is kind of modeled on the data curation network's curated steps. You can see what range of users are kind of doing those activities on the different levels. Okay, back to you, Megan.
Yeah, so the last section we were going to go through is that's okay. Yeah, a bit about the community aspect of this work. So like Megan mentioned, there's a community facilitation team that kind of brings all of these administrators together. And I think some of the results from this survey will help inform the sorts of activities we do with that community. But we were also curious in the survey of just, trying to gauge, feedback about administrators like participation to date in the community. And you can see from the results that participating in this sort of national network community of practice, whatever we want to call it, is super important. Based on like the FTE numbers, most institutions have, one or less than one person. So you're often the only person in your institution doing this work. The chance to connect with others from other institutions who face similar challenges or who are also kind of learning about tools or curation is super valuable. So it's not just the the infrastructure in terms of the hardware and software, but also the human resources that's super important to support. Next slide, sorry. And then one thing to improve, though, is participation of smaller institutions. You can see here both large and medium-sized institutions participate quite frequently. So monthly or almost every month, they're attending meetings. Smaller institutions, I think other findings show that they're stretched more thin and maybe aren't able to be as engaged. So that's something for the community to think about going forward. Right, and back to Megan.
Thanks, Shahira. So just quickly, we'll just give you some discussion key insights and some next steps. We found that the admin community is very diverse with a range of experiences and challenges resulting from their size, but also their institutional contexts. However, we're finding there are many commonalities in terms of the challenges and needs that we can tackle collaboratively as a community. We also found that the institutional admins are very eager to learn from each other and work collaboratively to develop solutions to problems and things like that. So we're trying to build out opportunities for that kind of informal exchange as well. The data set is really helpful for us as the survey team, but also for the community to think about benchmarking services and think about improvements that we could make to the software for the Borealis team. We also wanted to demonstrate the importance of open research process using the principles of open science. So we're really pleased to be able to share all these things with the broader RDM community as well. In terms of next steps, we're working on the qualitative analysis of the open-ended questions, so stay tuned for the results from that. We're also planning to channel the feedback from the community into initiatives, maybe develop new resources, maybe some training sessions, things like that. We're also hoping to administer this survey on a regular basis, probably every 2 or 3 years, so we can track the changes in the needs of the community and help to target specific needs in that way. We'd like to acknowledge our fabulous working group members who couldn't present with us here today, but they've contributed so much time and effort in this process. We'd also like to thank the Digital Research Alliance of Canada for helping with the translations of all survey materials. And a special thank you to the community members for taking the survey and also helping with the validation testing as well. And we're happy to answer questions during the Q&A, but also feel free to reach out to us at our emails there. Thanks so much, everyone, for your attention.
All right, thank you all for that. Okay, and next up we have the 2 recorded lightning talks, which will be played back to back. So first up will be Julie Rudder, Rebecca Cuddy, and Rolanda Rodriguez from the University of North Carolina. Their talk is titled Connecting Open Data to Published Articles in the Carolina Digital Repository. And then after that, we will hear from Alexandra Schaffner and Brianna Wham from Penn State. And their talk is titled Empowering Curators of an Institutional Repository, Developing Curator Features in Scholar Sphere.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Cuddy, the Institutional Repository Librarian at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I'm going to briefly talk about a project that I did with my colleagues Julie Rudder and Rolanda Rodriguez to connect data in 2 UNC repositories to their article outputs. First, some really quick background on the repositories that we looked at. The Carolina Digital Repository is an institutional repository that supports data. It's also the home of UNC's open access policy. The open access policy applies only to articles, which is why we concentrated on articles in this investigation. CDR also contains other types of deposits, such as student papers and multimedia collections that can contain data. CDR only has a modest amount of data, about 100 or so deposits, which are mostly self-deposited via our web form. UNC Dataverse is a data repository that is hosted and managed by the UNC Research Data Management Corps. They have a lot more data than CDR, but only about 1,100 data sets or so met our investigation criteria, which were that the data were created by UNC Chapel Hill affiliates and were deposited within the open access policy timeframe, which is 2016 to the present. Since there are so many data sets in Dataverse, we were only able to look at a subset of the 1,100 files for this presentation, but we intend to continue the investigation. Our research questions were, can we easily find articles that are connected to data sets deposited in CDR and UNC Dataverse? We wanted to know how much time it took to do this and what methods work best. We also wanted to know how many articles connected to data sets could be deposited under the open access policy and how many were already openly available. We were able to examine both research questions for CDR, but only the second for Dataverse at this time. Here's the methodology that we used. To locate articles associated with datasets, we first look through the dataset metadata for a direct link to the article or DOI. If there was no link, we searched for the dataset DOI in Google to see if it had been referenced in an article. If that didn't return results, we did Google searches for references to the article or dataset title. To confirm that the article and dataset were linked together, we compared the article's author list and date of publication to the datasets to see if they matched. We also checked the article text for a data availability statement or mention of an associated dataset. For CDR, we reviewed 71 datasets. 41 of these datasets had a clear association to an article. 24 depositors made a direct reference to an article in the dataset, but only 6 actually included some type of link to a data. 81% of the articles were already open access. We deposited 7 articles to the CDR and linked the data to the article. Since Dataverse is much larger than CDR, we were only able to look at a subset of 307 datasets. This subset contained related links to the articles in the metadata. With this subset, we focused on the second research question regarding open access and deposit eligibility. We wanted to know if the articles referenced in the related links were the articles associated with the datasets, and if so, do the articles reference data in the UNC Dataverse? We also wanted to know how many articles were eligible for deposit in CDR and could possibly be linked back to Dataverse for enhanced discovery. So 26 datasets referenced articles which were eligible for deposit under UNC's open access policy. Out of those 26 articles, 12 contained a link or reference to the dataset in an article, usually a DOI. So some preliminary findings. It seems pretty obvious, but bidirectional links between the articles and datasets were the quickest and easiest to confirm the association. Links to datasets do not always appear in a standard place across journals, although data availability statements seem to be getting adopted more widely. DOI links were favored in Dataverse. Linking in general was not great for articles from CDR, and we need to do more to encourage authors to link to dataset DOIs. There seems to be a correlation between open data and open articles in the CDR set. If the data was openly available, there was a good chance that the article was open too. While this is great for research, it does not support our goals for the open access policy implementation, which are to make research that is behind a paywall more openly available. For our next steps, we'd like to complete the UNC Dataverse investigation. Once we have the results of that investigation, we'll share it with UNC's Research Data Management Core team to see what collaborations could come from it. We'd also like to think more about the scale and staffing for future projects if we decide to continue a dataset linking service. This investigation took longer and was more involved than we anticipated, so we want to make sure that any ongoing programs are sustainable. Thank you very much. We look forward to your questions.
Hello, my name is Brianna Wham, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ali Schaffner. We're excited to share with you today how we are developing new features in our institutional repository ScholarSphere to improve user experience, enhance deposits, and empower curators.
ScholarSphere is an open access institutional repository for publications, research data, and creative works. Penn State University Libraries developed and manages ScholarSphere to collect, preserve, and share digital research content. Through depositing in ScholarSphere, researchers can share their data, comply with grant requirements, get credit for their work, and preserve their data. ScholarSphere is self-deposit for Penn State faculty, staff, and students, but we do provide curation services from Penn State curators, as well as through the Data Curation Network. So this is an example of a ScholarSphere work. You can see the title, thumbnail, and description at the top left, several metadata fields to the right, and the files, work history, and some analytics below those. Here is an overview of our workflow. The majority of scholarly works enter ScholarSphere through self-deposit. We also receive open access articles via an internal system with Penn State's researcher metadata database. Upon deposit, a record is generated in Airtable, which is a spreadsheet database, at which point a Penn State curator reviews the work and determines whether it will be curated locally or be sent to the data curation network. After the files and metadata are reviewed in the curation step, we then contact the depositor to request information or changes. Oftentimes, changes are made, and we conclude the process by going back to Airtable to document our curation actions. So as curators, we do encounter some pain points along this workflow. So first, because we're primarily self-deposit, we find that users are often confused about some of the nuances of the system as they deposit their works. Second, depositors often don't realize that their works are being curated after deposit, and we'd like to increase our response rate after we contact depositors regarding improvements to their files or metadata. And finally, our current system of communication between curators and depositors is one-to-one through personal email, which can make collaboration and documentation more challenging.
So in response to these identified pain points, we're enhancing our institutional repository with 3 features. Firstly, we are introducing deposit pathways, which aim to elevate user experience and deposit quality by providing tailored pathways for scholarly works, as well as datasets and code. This includes unique metadata fields and validation requirements to ensure a streamlined and efficient deposit process. Looking at this in a little bit more detail, our implementation involves a user-friendly approach where depositors begin by selecting a specific work type. Each work type is linked to its most suitable pathway within the system. Once the depositor chooses that work type, the system dynamically displays our required metadata for all publications, as well as relevant metadata fields and specific requirements associated with that particular type of work. So for instance, here on the right, you can see our scholarly works pathway, and some specific metadata fields that are included here are things like the publisher statement. Additionally, we have a dataset and code pathway where we have specific metadata fields such as geographic area, as well as a validation requirement for a README file. Secondly, we're introducing a curation request feature whereby a depositor can request curation prior to publication while their work is still in a draft status. We anticipate that this will not only enhance deposit quality, but also foster increased engagement between depositors and our curators, ultimately enriching the overall repository content. In our implementation of the curation request feature, we've incorporated a clear distinction between 2 modes, review and then publish, or publish and then review. Additionally, we've introduced a mechanism allowing depositors to save their draft work and request curation. Upon selecting this option, the work is submitted to our Airtable instance with a designated label indicating curation requested. This labeling ensures that these records are prioritized for prompt curation review. And lastly, our integration with LibAnswers establishes a shared and trackable solution, improving curator to depositor interactions, as well as curator collaboration. In our implementation of this integration, we seamlessly utilize the LibAnswers API to generate tickets. This functionality is accessible to curators within a works settings. When curators choose the contact depositor via LibAnswers option, a ticket is automatically generated. The ticket pulls in crucial information such as the work title and depositor contact details. Curators are then presented with a dedicated space to draft their message and keep communication streams regarding a work together. So overall, we're making some improvements to our Scholarsphere curation workflow, whereby we have the draft works and request curation, as well as we're using things like LibAnswers to coordinate our information or change requests. Thank you for listening.
All right. So now we are at the question and answers portion of the day, and we have actually a whole bunch of questions. So let's just jump right in. And so that is just about we are just about at time, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to our presenters and audience for participating in the session. Next, we have a 15-minute break, and then we'll have our social activity game night from 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern Time. And please note that that will be a new Zoom link, which you can find in the Feed Loop Sessions tab. All right, and I hope that everybody has a great rest of their day.